Under the finals lights, an empty chair stares back at America. A lone headset glints like a trophy no one will touch. Then the phones start buzzing. Push alerts slice through the pregame hum. Report: ESPN demotes Hall of Famer Doris Burke. Tim Legler elevated to #1 team with Mike Breen and Richard Jefferson. Reported by Andrew Marchand in The Athletic, attributed to sources briefed on the decision. Reportedly. The word lands like a gavel, and the room exhales into disbelief. We remember her voice before we remember the score. Doris steady over chaos, stitching meaning to motion, seeing a backdoor cut before it opens, naming a rotation before the camera catches it. Her calls aren't loud, they're exact. Coaches nod, players listen. Fans feel smarter because she respects them enough to tell the truth without spectacle. Now a record scratch. The montage of finals moments freezes. A graphic flickers. The #1 lineup returns. Her name gone. The silence is louder than any buzzer. The reaction arrives like a storm front. Where's Doris? Respect the craft. Congrats Legler, but why this? Don't make excellence a revolving door. Don't shrink the booth after we finally widened it. Tim Legler's a pro, a film room surgeon in his own right. This isn't a knife for him. The question is why the switch? Why now? Why like this? We know what the finals booth means. It's not just a job. It's the voice that braids generations, the soundtrack of living rooms where immigrant parents lend the language of the game alongside their kids. It's credibility you don't inherit. You build it, rep by rep, night after night, with a prep binder thicker than clout. So how does a standard bearer become expendable overnight? Is this merit or the machine? The machine that prizes novelty over trust, youth over wisdom, metrics over memory. The machine that speaks in leaks, not reasons, and treats legends like line items on a spreadsheet. Because that empty chair isn't just a prop, it's a question mark glowing under primetime lights. And until someone answers, the crowd will keep asking. The timeline refreshes, the questions get louder, the answers don't. But once the dust settled, a harsher truth punched through the noise. A decision like this doesn't happen in a vacuum. Under the bright lights of June, the finals booth isn't just a job, it's a promise. For years, Doris turned that promise into practice, a barrier breaker who walked through a door and then held it open with both hands. Hall of Fame honors didn't arrive as charity. They arrived as receipts for seasons of preparation, respect, and the kind of calm that makes a frantic game feel legible. When her voice rides over a possession, you hear dignity, not ego. You hear responsibility. That's why this seat shuffle rattles more than the run of show. The finals crew is the sport's Supreme Court. Their names decide what sounds like truth. Switch a justice and the ruling shift. Switch a voice, and the meaning of a moment can tilt. ESPN stakes aren't just ratings bumps, they're the brand's soul. Do you prize trust that compounds over time, or the dopamine hit of newness? Do you nourish chemistry or harvest it? Loyal fans don't just watch, they believe. And belief is a delicate thing. For viewers, especially families who learned basketball English through her cadence, this isn't content, it's identity. It's the pride of seeing expertise that looks like your aunt, your coach, your community, honored at the highest altar. It's a message to every daughter taking notes in the cheap seats. Your prep matters. Your mind belongs. Pull that mic away, and it echoes beyond one series. It asks a question about who gets to author the soundtrack of America's games. And Tim Legler? Respect the resume. He's a meticulous breakdown artist, chalkboard sharp, beloved for turning confusion into clarity. This isn't a takedown for him. It's the test of values. Two truths can coexist, celebrate Legler's craft, and still ask whether the process reflects the game's best self. Elevation without erasure. Why is that so hard? So what drove this call? Pure performance? Private chemistry notes? A demographic bet on younger ears? The quiet math of budgets and rights fees in a post-cable knife fight? Or the restless churn of an era that confuses motion with progress? In newsrooms, Slack pings pile up. Producers parse language. Team optimization. Fresh perspective. Meanwhile, highlight reels flicker, and fans do their own auditing. And for ESPN, the clock is louder than ever. Streaming pivots, cord-cutting curves, and an NBA rights landscape that punishes missteps. You can't sell the sport's biggest stage while training your audience to distrust the ushers. Get the booth wrong, and every whistle sounds suspect. Every cutaway feels like PR. Get it right, and you meant loyalty that no algorithm can fake. This isn't aesthetics. It's survival of a brand, of a bond, of a belief that excellence earns daylight. And the discourse splits along familiar fault lines: analytics versus artistry, progress versus PR, innovation, institutional memory. Hashtags duel, then merge. Respect the booth. Do right by the game. Congrats Legler, but. Podcasts ask whether transparency is a luxury or the minimum price of trust. The people don't demand perfection. They demand an honest why. Because the next beats matter. Receipts are coming, reactions you won't expect, and a moment of moral clarity that flips the board. If the booth is a trust, then the public is the trustee. And trustees have questions. To understand the shock, you have to meet the real antagonist, an invisible force that's been rearranging chairs for years. Call it the machine. It does not wear a headset or feel a crowd swell. It studies a spreadsheet and decides who speaks for the game. In shattered boardrooms, silhouettes lean over projections that look like battle maps, cells and charts, up arrows and down arrows, red lines through names that once felt permanent. The machine speaks a dialect of cost centers and deliverables, and when it moves, the booth moves with it, even if the audience never asked. First came the cost-cutting eras, the polite memos about efficiencies, the cheerful slide decks promising the same magic with fewer magicians. Then the rights negotiations, 9-figure storms that shake walls. And every storm demands ballast. Someone looks at youthful demos and whispers the spell of freshness. Freshness is a beautiful word. It smells like summer and reinvention, until it becomes a solvent that erases memory. Legends turn into line items. Beloved duos are broken up like varsity seniors told to retry out as freshmen. Chemistry, once a living organism, gets treated like a plug-in filter. Layoffs arrive on quiet Fridays. Announcements land after lineups change, never before. So the public learns outcomes, rarely the reasoning. By the time a statement appears, the decision has already hardened into fact. In that gap, the machine does its cleanest work. It offers the world a phrase we've all memorized: sources briefed on the decision. Leaks become the scaffolding of truth, a skeleton story dressed in corporate beige. Journalists do their jobs, audiences do the math, and the machine enjoys the benefit of fog. Because the leak delivers the what and starves the why. But the why is where trust lives. Meanwhile, the algorithm glitters like a neon shortcut. It promises reach without roots, 1 million views for a single hot take, a dopamine drip of shorter clips and faster edits. New voices, new cuts, new everything. Change is cosplay for courage. Risk-taking is noble. Proxy risk is cheap. When the machine confuses the two, institutional memory erodes like shoreline. Faces cycle through the desk, but the desk loses its soul. You can't clip wisdom into 60 seconds and expect it to anchor a cathedral like the finals. And here's the twist the discourse keeps missing. This critique does not live on Tim Legler's shoulders. He's a craftsman, a film room metronome with chalkboard clarity, respected by players and viewers who crave the why behind the what. His promotion can be earned and still raise a harder question. What process decides who inherits the mic and who gets faded to ambient? Is the choice a reflection of performance, of chemistry, of genuine vision, or a reflex toward novelty dressed in strategy? Fans can hold two ideas at once: congratulate the analyst who steps up, and demand transparency from the system that moves the ladder. Because a booth is not a throne, it is a trust. Trust hates fog. Listen to the media pods this week. Innovation versus integrity. Evolution versus amnesia. Producers swap war stories about chemistry you can't manufacture, about duos that finish each other's thoughts the way great guards read each other's eyes. Fans fled timelines with compilations, the in-click and before the perfect question. the timing of a silence that lets a moment breathe. You can't A/B test that and ship it overnight. And you can feel a deeper ache under the discourse, a longing for stability in a world set to shuffle. For immigrants who learned the game in bright living rooms with plastic couch covers, for kids who found confidence by naming a pin down before it happened, the booth isn't background noise, it's a teacher. The machine says teachers are replaceable as long as the lesson is short. But classrooms built from trust don't move on command. They move when the students believe. So yes, rotate chairs, refresh graphics, invent new segments, but guard the covenant. Explain the why before the what. Let the public see the calculus, and stop confusing secrecy with strategy. Because empires don't collapse from a single ratings dip. They erode when people stop trusting the narrators of their own passion. If the machine...
Meanwhile, fans built the ledger themselves. One thread stacked a dozen Doris called it first clips next to a dozen Legler breaks it down explainers. Both were elite. Both made people smarter. The comments sang a consistent chorus, promote without erasing. Hashtag let the work speak, hashtag respect the booth, hashtag congrats Legler trended alongside hashtag keep Doris on finals. A push-pull that felt less like a fight and more like a demand. Do right by the game and the audience. Value versus velocity. That's where the split cut deepest. Value is craft that deepens the game. A voice that slows the heart rate and expands the picture. Velocity is novelty that chases the moment, a carousel that promises excitement by spinning faster. One earns trust, the other borrows it. Corporate PR tried to make them synonyms, but viewers can feel the difference the way a point guard feels pressure without looking. The tension hit a peak on a polarizing panel where performance kept getting repeated like a spell. Performance, as if the receipts weren't public. Performance, as if the metrics knew the language of trust. Performance, as if experience were a flaw to be corrected. No one said bias, but audiences heard the dog whistles anyway. The familiar hum that suggests excellence must be repackaged when it wears the wrong face. The comments didn't mince words. Say what you mean or bring the data. Reaction shots flew, hashtags crawled beneath faces, clips of both analysts doing what they do best filled feeds, and the quiet verdict emerged. The story isn't whether Tim Legler can deliver. He can't. The story is whether a process that values churn over chemistry can be trusted with the mic that narrates America's favorite stage. People want continuity built from merit, not a roulette wheel spun in a conference room. Producers whispered about new energy. Fans asked for older virtues, transparency, receipts, a roadmap that explains how greatness is measured. The split-screen debates became a mirror, reflecting back who we think we are when the lights hit the court. Are we a country that rewards the work or a brand that chases the next flash? Skepticism turned into protective loyalty. Immigrant families who learned the language of basketball through careful breakdowns felt something intimate was being handled carelessly. "We trusted you with our living rooms," one comment read. "Don't tell us to forget who taught us." And through it all, Doris stayed silent, letting years of receipts whisper. The noise was loud, but the tape was louder, and fans leaned in, waiting for proof to roll soon. Then came a counter, not from a podium or a press release, but from the only court that still matters, the work itself. Then the real hit, not as propaganda, but as proof. The resume arrived like a slow-building tide, Doris reading the weak side tag before the camera found it, catching the flare screen hidden inside a decoy action, mapping a late-game switch 2 passes early. Her voice was steady, the kind of clarity that lowers the noise in your head. A head coach, composite but unmistakably real, described her prep as relentless. She asked the question behind the question and shows up with film to back it up. A veteran forward talked about trust. She never hunted a gotcha. She honored the work. An assistant broke it down more simply. If she says it on air, it's already on our whiteboard. Clip after clip stitched the same story. Dignity married to detail, insight without ego, the rare blend that makes a complex possession feel like common sense. The voiceover asks the only question that matters when the lights aren't flattering. What does greatness look like when no room is watching? It looks like handwritten notes smudged from rewinds, names underlined so pronunciation honors family, phone calls that end with thank yous because the relationship matters more than the scoop. It looks like the humility to study film alone so that millions can feel seen together. Greatness looks like service you can measure in quiet. And when the reel ended, the applause didn't explode. It swelled, like recognition catching up to what many already knew. The principal came next, brief and measured, resolute without venom. No podiums, no theatrics, just a line that refused to chase outrage. The job is to serve the game, not the seat. Let the work stand where the spotlight fades. No subtweets, no score settling. A reminder that if the booth is earned, it is earned by making the game cleaner for the people who love it. In a week drowning in discourse, it cut through because it trusted the audience to understand the difference between status and stewardship. The line ricocheted across feeds not as a clapback, but as a compass. And then the people. Fans began dropping side-by-side threads like court diagrams. On the left, Doris breaking down Spain action, seeing the back screen shape as the ball is still above the slot. On the right, Tim Legler walking viewers through the same play later that season. Chalkboard crisp, angles exact, footwork honored. Another clip paired her quiet pregame note about a bench wing's corner gravity with his halftime illustration of how that gravity bent a defense. The point wasn't competition, it was convergence. The audience wrote the thesis the network could not or would not. Promote without erasing. The work proves both belong. Don't mistake a zero-sum ladder for a shared craft. Tim Legler got his flowers, and rightly so. He has that teacher's patience, the chalkboard cadence that demystifies decisions, the humility to let the play be the protagonist. He loves the craft, and it shows. The mic drop never pointed at him, it pointed past him to a higher idea. The booth is not a throne for a chosen few, it's a trust held in common. You inherit it by adding light, not by dimming someone else's. If you celebrate Legler's elevation while insisting Doris's receipts remain in the sunlight, you're not fence-sitting. You're building the house the game deserves. An analytics account with credibility built over years posted a mega thread, slicing her film IQ with surgical clarity. Early tags, veer switches recognized in real time, the nuance between switching and scramming, the respect for screeners who free stars. The thread mapped her anticipatory language. Notice how she says, "Watch the dunker spot before the lob arrives," and paired it with Legler's in-depth teaching on the same sequences. A star player hit like. Minutes later, a coaching legend reposted with 2 words that end most arguments. Pros no. The signal wasn't anti-anyone. It was a collective nod to the standard. And that's where the lens turned. If the finals are the sport's cathedral, then the best voices are caretakers, not kings. The mic belongs to the game, not the machine that decides who gets to hold it. Caretakers polish the glass, sweep the aisles, keep the echoes true. Their pride isn't in being seen, it's in making sure the people see better. When caretakers trade places, the light should never dim. A torch passed, not a torch stolen, unless an institution insists on playing kingmaker in the shadows, calling secrecy strategy and churn innovation. The dimension that shook people most wasn't the montage or the quotes, it was the feeling of alignment. For immigrant families who learned basketball syntax one careful breakdown at a time, the reel felt like respect returned. For kids in broadcasting classes, tracing sets on notebook paper, it felt like permission. Your study can be sacred. For longtime fans tired of takes that melt by morning, it felt like a promise renewed. Vindication doesn't have to be loud to be decisive. The clips kept coming. A sequence where she calls out a late slip before the weak side low man can tag, a halftime note that a coach later confessed shaped a lineup tweak, a post-game moment where she deflects credit to a backup center's screen angles. Side by side with Legler's finest, his clear mapping of ghost actions, his elegant breakdown of drop coverage variances, his insistence on giving role players their due, the synthesis strengthened the argument. The audience wants more light, not fewer lamps. That's the mic drop. Not a scream, not a dunk, but a standard held up to the light. You can refresh the booth while respecting the elders who built the roof. You can add new caretakers without changing the locks. And if you insist on the throne model, one in, one out, explanation optional, the people will remind you who pays for the cathedral and who fills it with faith. But if the people's verdict was clear, the ripple effect was about to hit everything. Ratings buzz, corporate messaging, and the way future talent gets chosen. The conversation widened like ripples crossing a lake, and suddenly it wasn't just sports pages whispering, but font pages, culture desks, and Sunday shows. Composite media columns asked hard questions about talent pipelines that feel more like revolving doors than ladders. Podcasts climbed the charts with episodes that sounded like interventions. Is algorithmic churn eroding trust faster than any ratings graph can replace it? One episode's waveform pulsed across timelines, matching the public's heartbeat. ESPN spoke, careful and beige. Phrases appeared like placeholders. Team optimization, chemistry, evolving coverage. The public heard the words and remembered how the moment felt. The empty chair, the leak that arrived before the explanation. People can forgive decisions, they don't forgive being handled. When the booth belongs to the game, euphemism sounds like static. Then came the unexpected allies, the ones who usually stay out of network family business. A respected journalist wrote that trust is not a toggle you can switch off for Q3 and restore in Q4. A rival network voice, careful and gracious, said what many felt. When your cathedral is full, don't rearrange the choir without